intro. Great. So welcome to Shh, Don't Speak on It, the podcast where we keep you energized, informed, and empowered. I am Saheladine.
And I'm Teresa.
And today we have, and I say this every time, but we literally do have such amazing guests. And, every time we have to keep improving, and keeping the same level and same quality of guests, and we have continued to do that today. Today we have Christina. Christina, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, yeah, it's great to be here. Thank you so much for the invitation, Cerise and Saheladine.
Of course. And can you just pronounce your surname for me, just so I've got it, and we all got it?
Of course. Yeah, it's Christina Tueje.
Tueje. Very nice. Very nice. Where's that name come from? Where's that surname originate?
Yeah, well, my parents are Nigerian, so it's a Nigerian name.
Amazing. Fantastic. Well, it's really a pleasure to have you, Christina, on our podcast. I don't know if you've watched any of our podcasts or have a chance to see what we talk about and how we normally do it. But, we like to really get into the nitty gritty of whatever it is that you do, your topic, your sector, your area of expertise. Really try to understand your experience and background, what your journey has been from where you've got to where you've been to where you are now, and also talk a little bit around your sector and your industry and what you do, and maybe some of the challenges and things that are coming up right now, and things that people may be experiencing, and we also want to try and have a resolve. We always want to see how we can improve, how we can make things better. And also, how we can really just try to encourage and inspire people, and maybe introduce someone to something new, because I know what we're going to talk about today, most people might not be aware of or have experience. So what I want to do is just introduce you a little bit about your background and what you've done and what you've achieved so far, and then we'll delve right into the conversation. But you are a founder and strategy director of GRC Information Management, which is your own business, right? And your own company. So that's fantastic. So you're the founder of a Black-owned data strategy consultancy, which represents several different leading brands with experience of spearheading change management initiatives on a global scale. So, obviously your business is not a small affair. It's definitely trying to do things on a very big scale. So we love that. So you successfully generated and contributed approximately £1.3 million to the supplier diversity ecosystem within STEM, which is fantastic. And you've been a direct provider of services through various collaborations with STEM as well. So really amazing stuff. Consistently, you've supported and enabled approximately 20 AI founders, so artificial intelligence founders from underrepresented communities every month. You established and you lead the UK's first and leading professional network for Black privacy professionals. And your aim is to build connections within that group to create opportunities that unlock the full potential of diverse artificial intelligence, AI, and privacy talent, whilst elevating career and business success for its members. Successfully, you advocate for diverse talent within the technology, data, and privacy professions by partnering with top-tier law firms and the UK Black Business Show, which I think we're all aware of, that company. 2024, you were award nominee for the prestigious and high-profile Picasso Privacy Awards in recognition of your outstanding contribution to the dynamic, fast-paced, and increasingly complex privacy sector. And through coaching, mentorship, and leadership development programs that you deliver, you enable career and business success for approximately 50 individuals and business-to-business clients every month. So I think every woman we've had on here so far, every guest we've had on here so far just does so many things. And it's just fantastic that you do all that. So, I mean, privacy sector, I mean, that's not something I think many of us come across a lot. Tell us about what's inspired you to get into the privacy sector, and, why is it such a passion of yours?
Yeah, wow, that's a fantastic question. So my background is data. I've always worked in the data industry, if you like. Started out with in sort of like data analysis, data management roles, looking at data to understand where services and companies are doing well, where they're not doing well, and then making recommendations for improvement just based on data collection and data analysis. And then I moved away from, if you like, data analysis, data management into handling complaints under what was then the UK Data Protection Act. I've been working in this space for a long time. So as I say, I moved from data analysis, data management through to working under the old UK Data Protection Act, mainly handling complaints and questions and queries around data handling under the old UK Data Protection Act. And then that kind of naturally evolved into where I am now, which is sort of the GDPR, global data protection, cybersecurity, and increasingly AI risk assessments, AI governance.
No, that's a fantastic journey.
Yes, it is so wonderful. So you know, I got some topics to bring up as always, and some that's very what I've seen, because I see a lot, and going into companies and also on the news, where we're finding more and more is that companies aren't taking the data protection as serious as they should. We have more and more security breaches. There's more and more people who don't understand the data protection side within organizations, and I don't see any training happening with a lot of organizations. And I've seen it firsthand where, staff may ask for information or share information, not understand, and you can't give out someone's phone number, you can't, and they don't understand. So where do you think we're at as far as the data protection? And do you think that the companies are doing enough?
That's a really good question, Teresa. And I know one of the many hats that you wear is HR. So HR and data protection kind of, they present challenges. HR on its own presents challenges, data protection on its own presents challenges, but the two together, presents endless challenges for HR professionals. Where do I think companies are at? So I mentioned the GDPR, which is the General Data Protection Regulation, which came into effect in 2018, so 6 years ago now. So within the UK, as I'm sure you know, we had data protection legislation prior to 2018, and as did other countries across the globe. But what happened with the GDPR, which is European data protection legislation, and we've adopted it in the UK, even though we've broken away from Europe, we've adopted it and adapted it slightly, but largely fully embraced it. And elsewhere in the world, we've got global data protection legislation emerging that's largely been driven by the GDPR.
Yeah.
Where we are now, in answer to your question, kind of 6 years on, is further along in terms of boosting compliance and raising awareness and protecting businesses. But I would say overall, companies can and should go further. So your point around breaches, well, there's a sense of inevitability around breaches, particularly with AI. AI sadly makes it a little bit easier for the bad actors to do bad things, if you like. And your point around awareness, yes, I agree to a certain extent, because I think what GDPR has done is it has raised individuals' awareness of their rights to a certain extent, and it's elevated data protection within many companies up to sort of exec level. So data protection has a bit more attention and a bit more money now within organizations. But overall, I do agree with you. There are many companies could go further. And again, more so with AI, there's a lot of scope for companies to go further with their data protection resilience to enable their AI adoption.
Yeah. But I think that it also depends on the industry, because me being into the construction and engineering, well, one of the engineering companies, they sent me on the data protection as an HR, and they understood, and we had policies. But I don't think smaller subcontractors, smaller companies understand the importance of data protection yet. So, and the UK is made up of 99 percent of SMEs. So, yes, you have the larger companies that may understand it to an extent, but I still think that the smaller companies who that employs most people don't fully understand and haven't embraced it fully.
I do agree. And that's what I'm seeing, to be fair, to your point, in terms of micro business owners, even 6 years on after GDPR, I still sadly come across micro business owners who say things to me like, oh, GDPR, data protection, oh, everything's okay in my business, everything's in the cloud.
Yes.
Well, that doesn't really kind of get to, where they need to be in terms of boosting data protection compliance and boosting data protection resilience. So and basic things aren't in place. I'm seeing that with micro business owners and even SMEs and larger corporates. Basic things aren't in place in terms of the website privacy notice. Either there isn't one, or it's not, up to scratch in terms of transparency. Here in the
There's no
UK,
policy. There's no policy. I see that
exactly.
too, building websites for people that
Yes.
they don't have a data protection policy put onto their website. So, and again, like you said, there's no pop-up. I've seen that, and just those little things make a difference because you legally are obligated to put up a pop-up. I've had situations where I've tried to access websites in the US and they won't allow me to get on because they don't fully, they haven't fully, they're not protected as far as the EU regulations. So because I'm in the UK, or what they call European, remit, they won't allow me to access their website because they don't follow those same policies. And these are like news or, shopping websites. Some of them I can't access from over here.
Yeah, I mean, these are important considerations just in terms of access to data, data security, geographical boundaries around access. And although I talked about global data protection legislation, I mean, in the States, there's an interesting, there's an interesting approach to emerging data protection and AI regulation.
Each state has their own law, so it's a separate jurisdiction. So not only do you have to go by federal law, some states are more lenient than others and whatnot.
Yeah, exactly. That's the complexity with the states. It's state by state, and the approach is slightly different based on, I guess, appetite for risk, crudely. But for the larger companies, wherever they are, this is the challenge in terms of data protection and compliance. They need to be almost globally data protection compliant. I mean, I know that sounds like a lot of work, but there are efficient ways of doing that, setting the bar high and making sure that in doing that, you're not in conflict with other data protection legislation that you need to comply with. So to your point, global data protection legislation is evolving, but it is complex. And I guess that's why companies are, I don't know, struggling maybe.
Yeah, because that is the challenge, because there's such a different way and approach to data protection in various different countries. And because of the ease of transnational enterprise and also, trade and there's everybody's commercing with each other globally. So it's almost like that's happened, but data protection is trying to catch up with the speed at which, there's so much transnational, transatlantic, commerce going on. And it's almost as if we're quite behind on getting a global understanding that's coherent enough for everybody to be able to have those international relationships globally, because everybody's trying to do things globally, on a bigger scale. In order to scale up the business, you have to. That's the time we're in. But it's almost legislation, not just even data protection, but a lot of other legislation is just not quite there to support and sustain those relationships. And I think that is why there is such a challenge with, especially, a lot of companies nowadays, whether you're large or small, everybody's sort of having those relationships. And I work with global companies, and I find that challenge when we're just signing, basic engagement letters, engagement contracts, agreeing that we're going to do business together, and the laws, you're like, okay, do we go with your laws, or do we go with ours? Which is
jurisdiction?
So I think legislation as a whole, and that interests me because I am a lawyer, but I think legislation definitely needs to really, and I think it's trying to catch up with the global world where we live in, and then now with AI, it's almost like scrambling to kind of catch up. Do you think that's true?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that, Sahila, and you've both sort of touched on the complexity, but in different ways. So almost the problem, one of the many problems we've got in this space is GDPR, or data protection legislation, as you've sort of hinted at, is not, because we all work in the global marketplace. GDPR, data protection, is not standalone. When we look at GDPR, data protection legislation, we need to look at other data-related legislation like EU AI Act, Data Governance Act, Data Act, Digital Services Act, and the list goes on, Digital Markets Act, and the DMA, and the list goes on. So that adds extra layers of complexity for all organizations. What do the raft of these legislations, what do they all mean? To what extent are they relevant? If I'm a freelancer, if I'm a big corporate, if I'm in a creative, or if I'm in healthcare, to what extent do I need to be compliant? To what extent do I need to understand all of these things? I think because of the overwhelm, people just stop and don't do anything and almost freeze. So, as you quite rightly say, Zilladine, the data landscape, if you like, from a regulatory point of view, is evolving. Probably not at the same pace, definitely not at the same pace in relation to the rapid pace of development with technology and AI.
Yeah.
But it needs to go further. But actually, businesses aren't keeping up. They're not, they're not really.
They're not doing the basic. Some of
Yeah.
them not doing the basic, which is quite, worrisome. Because, when I find that someone is quick to give out someone's phone number, or, address, or first and last name, those things, they don't realize that anything that identifies someone, you cannot give it out. So you have to keep it safe. One thing that I find as an issue, but even our own NHS
has had a data breach recently. So security, and you're into cybersecurity, it's getting the whole hacking, the whole technology side. As far as even with my website, I've had to up the security because of bots. Okay.
Yeah.
So I pay extra. I've upped the security to a certain extent. Oh my God. To a certain extent. But it's a lot more difficult than what it used to be. And what do you think? I mean, what's your take on it as far as, I'm gonna have to edit this out. Hold on 1 second. Let me just try to. My room is very sunny. And I had to put something there, but
did the sun just come from behind the clouds, was it?
No, because I have a shade thing, but because the windows are slanted, and I had glued it, and the sun is so beaming hot, it won't stay. The suctions won't stay and everything. So I had to kind of, hopefully it won't fall, but I kind of hide it. Okay, that's better. I'll edit it out. Yeah. Okay. So what do you think about what do you think about the whole situation as far as hacking bots? Because I'm finding an significant level of bots that's visiting my website every single day that's trying to get into my server and whatnot. And like I said, I've had to up the security. And even now with me developing a software, I'm buying, I have to buy, a server, and I make sure that I got the server its location in an EU
Yeah,
country.
yeah.
These are things to think about. What is your take on the increased level of cybersecurity and the issues that, involving the cybersecurity issues?
Yeah, it's an ongoing challenge. I think for companies, and I think it's a bit like the data protection challenge. It's an ongoing kind of journey or headache for companies. Now, the
Yeah.
thing with cyber attacks, increasing cyber attacks, at the risk of sounding a bit alarmist, data breaches and hacks there's a sense of inevitability around data breaches and cyber hacks. It's
Yeah.
sadly the world that we live in. But what's slightly scary about that is that AI, as I think I said at the top of at the beginning of the call, at the beginning of the recording, AI makes life a little bit easier for the bad actors. And the other
Yeah.
thing with I know you know this, but just for the audience in case they don't know, the other thing with cyber, which kind of explains the rise of cyber attacks, is that it's professionalized now. It's
Yes,
it's highly organized,
it is
um,
highly organized.
highly sophisticated,
Yeah.
and it's like, with the best hackers out there, it's like their job. It is like literally that is what they're paid to do.
Yeah.
So that's the world that we live in. And as you say, the best we can do is raise our awareness and raise our resilience.
They said, I had read on the forum, because I didn't understand why bots kept on trying to attack my website. But I had read on the forum that the bots actually learn. So as we make changes, like if you keep on blocking them, and if you put certain stuff into place, they will actually learn how to get around it, because that's how they're designed to do. However, if you kind of give them like an error page, they're not as, uh, they can't really tell or whatnot, but if you put something in place, they'll find a workaround. So yeah.
Yeah.
So if you put another technology, so I was reading that on a tech forum, but that's, with AI, that's quite interesting too, because now you can duplicate people's voices. You got intellectual property. What about images being used? And that. So tell us more about the AI scope as far as technology.
So, right. This is where it gets really interesting, because AI, as we all know, has been around for quite some time, but
Yeah.
obviously with Gen AI and Chat GPT in particular, which became really popular a couple of years ago, it's on everybody's radar, schools, workplaces, businesses, in our homes, everyone is talking about and or using AI. So, as I say, I've been in privacy for a very, very, very long time. Back in the day, people like me, privacy pros, we would say AI, hell no. It's, a swear word, don't get anywhere near it. It's
Yeah.
privacy intrusive. It's, too many unknown risks. Stay away from it. But now, roll forward to the world that we're in, people like me are not necessarily embracing AI, but we recognize that it's here to stay and
Yeah.
it's evolving and growing. And our work increasingly is much more about working with businesses to make sure that the way that they use AI is considered safe, ethical, and strategic and responsible, and all of those lovely things. So what I like to do in being a data protection or privacy pro is get organizations to leverage their data protection programs to enable their AI adoption. I realize I'm oversimplifying this, but for me, it is not possible to implement AI safely and ethically if your data protection infrastructure is, weak, not sound, not there.
Yeah.
So in answer to your question, Teresa, I'm you know, as a privacy pro, I'm actually quite excited about AI because it actually gives us an opportunity
Yeah.
to, you know, again, raise awareness, continue to raise awareness around data protection. Any prospect or client or company that approaches me and says, Chris, I want to do AI over here, I want to use AI over there, the first question I will ask them is, well, let's look at your data protection infrastructure. We need
Yeah.
to look at that before we even think about, you know, safe AI adoption. So I'm quite excited. It gives us, I'm quite excited about AI. It gives us an opportunity to raise the bar with data protection.
What do you say about people who say Big Brother's is spying on us? Like, you know, because Alexa is AI, you know, Siri is AI, you know, and now I just saw an article saying that the car is sharing information with police. So these smart cars are sharing information, your information to the police, whether they use it or not. So what do you, I mean, what's your take on it? Is Big Brother increasing? Yeah, of course it is, you know. And
Yeah,
what type of rights are we gonna have as people
yeah,
for, you know, the people spying on us or getting our information, listening to conversations and taking it, you know, and using it against us?
But we do sign.
yeah. This is the problem. Oh, sorry, say that again.
Sign it off. Now I was just going to say, we do sign a lot of, there's always a, you know, a consent, and
Yeah.
most people, you know, most of us don't
Don't
really
read.
sign and say, yes, we're giving our, you know, our consent to this data being shared, you know, but yeah, no, definitely. Please answer the question for Christina.
Yeah, yeah, happy to, which is a useful big question, and I kind of don't really know where to start. But what I think a useful place to start is to kind of go back to something we acknowledged earlier um, during our conversation around website privacy notices. So, yes, to jump to Teresa's point, we are definitely living in a surveillance society. And that's just going to increase with AI. So, yes, I'm agreeing with you on that. But when we go back to the basics, like the website privacy notice, this is where it's very important for us as business owners to be crystal clear and super transparent about the technology that we're using and why. And also to Salahadin's point, it's important that we clearly explain that, yeah, the terms, and we clearly explain what people's rights are, you know, right of access, right to rectification, right to be forgotten, and the list goes on, right to object, and things like that. So that's where organizations need to get better, really. They need to get better about knowing the technology that they're using, knowing where, you know, understanding the data processing within the technology that they're using, understanding what I call the data journey. If the data ends up, it starts here, where does it end up in terms of access and jurisdiction, location, country, and what rights do people have to that data that organizations are processing. So ChatGPT, I don't know if you've heard of Max Schrems, who is, any lawyers in the house might have heard of Max Schrems. Max Schrems is a very vociferous, how can I put it, privacy professional, kind of a purist, we call him, always fighting for, you know, privacy rights and always challenging big tech. Anyway, one of his big fights at the moment is ChatGPT, how, amongst other things, the way ChatGPT operates makes it quite difficult for us to exercise our rights. So if we go to a company that uses ChatGPT, for example, and we say to that company, we exercise our data protection right and say, I want you to give me all the data that you hold on me. You know, when you boil that down, for a company that uses ChatGPT, that's asking the company to declare that they use ChatGPT and the individual's data that they might have used in ChatGPT or any other technology, any other AI technology or any other technology that company is using So the reason why Max Schrems is challenging ChatGPT, amongst other things, and saying it's unlawful, is because it is very difficult for us as individuals to exercise our rights, or for OpenAI, who is the manufacturer or the company owner, if you like, of ChatGPT, it's quite difficult for them to fully respond when us as individuals exercise our rights, right to object, right to access, right to delete and things like that,
Yeah.
right to correct, right to rectification. It's quite difficult for us to exercise our rights because there's no, how can I put it, sort of traceability maybe, or accountability around data flows in a sort of potentially messy world of AI.
Yeah.
So they're my thoughts.
Bucket, right? It goes in a bucket and it gets mixed, and then it gets regurgitated in so many different ways. It gets sort of just fractioned, and that's what makes it very complex to decipher the data once it's gone into that input. Once it comes out, it's just a mix of various different, data entries, and it pulls from that information. So I guess that's why it's such a challenge. Once it goes in, it's hard to be able to get it out, decipher it, separate it from everything else that's in there.
It's just like, I think it's just like on my website, my privacy policy, if you read, it shows that I may share the information with analytics. I may hold information for chats. And I'm sharing it with third parties. So it kind of lists some of the third parties that I may share the information. Now, once it gets to those third parties, I don't know what is going on and what the information is being done with it once it goes to the third parties, because I may say, okay, yes, Google, and I've told the visitor that their information may be shared with Google
amongst other tracking or analytics companies. And then now Google may decide to share it with someone else, and I don't know.
But you've done your bit, right? Yeah, so let's get realistic. It's whilst we have to be accountable under data protection legislation, we have to be accountable for the data that we collect and we use, that we share with others. We have to do that in a realistic, efficient, and pragmatic way. And I like the way you've described your approach, Teresa. You've basically said, look, the data that you collect, where it goes, who it goes to, and you tell people that on your website. So it's down to individuals, if they are that curious, if you like, about the extent to which their data might be used by the people that you share their data with. They can then go onto, the respective privacy notice websites for those organizations, and then raise questions or challenge from there. I mean, in the ideal world, we would hold all our third parties to full account. But the reality of us micro business owners holding the Microsofts and the Googles of this world to account with the GA data, with the Google Analytics data that we share with them, is just not realistic. But you've demonstrated what we call best endeavors. Yeah, you've got a website privacy notice. There's a level of transparency there. You tell people that, some of their data will go to Google for this, that, and the other reason. And then people can be sign-pointed to the GA or Google's website privacy notice for them to read more.
At one point, some people were trying to stop giving away your location to companies or whatnot. But I like to know, I do have software on my website, so I can keep up with analytics to know where my visitors are coming from and their location. Now, although they can no longer give the exact location, it gives an approximate location. What do you say to people about tracking people locations for marketing purposes, what do you say about that? I mean, LinkedIn even do it. LinkedIn will tell you where your viewers are coming from, what the location or geographic. So we're entering a world where information is needed to make better business decisions. What do you feel about that? How do you feel about that?
how do I feel? On a personal level, uncomfortable. And as a privacy pro, my pragmatic response, I guess, is that it needs to be appropriate. Yeah, there are data protection principles that broadly say, you know, you need to have a good reason for collecting the data that you collect. You need to demonstrate transparency. You need to make sure it's secure. You need to make sure people can exercise their rights and so on. So as a privacy pro, I would say, you know, to business owners, do what you need to do with the data that you collect, you need to use, but just abide by the core data protection principles around, you know, appropriate justification, data minimization, you know, just collect what you need and make sure you use it, and tell people how you're going to use it and so on.
I noticed that LinkedIn changed the way they do their analytics as well recently, because they used to tell you where what company it is. Now, when you look to go into company, it says that it has to be a certain amount of people from the company before they share your company, and that's to keep people's you know, information private, so you don't know exactly, because you know, you can put two and two together. If it says, oh, a project manager looked at your you know, profile, and then the company that is from the you know, and then the company, or this amount of people looked at, then basically they're still telling who looked at your profile without paying for the advanced package, you know, to see who viewed your profile. So they've made changes recently to it. Do you think, you know, what do you think about LinkedIn and other companies sharing? Instagram used to show when other people looked at other people's profiles, and they stopped that because it was getting a lot of men in relationships in trouble now. Because they was like, oh, you've been on this, oh, you know. And so you know, years ago they stopped that. They said we will no longer show you who looked at who profile to your greater audience, you know. And so things are changing a little bit, but again, it's the big issue about privacy again.
Yeah, absolutely. It's good to see. I mean, I didn't realize that about Instagram. It's been a long time since I've used Instagram regularly. And I didn't realize that about LinkedIn, even though I use LinkedIn quite a lot. So it's great to hear that these big tech firms or these big social media channels are being responsive, being responsive to our privacy and our privacy rights. I think that's a good thing. The other thing that I think is, whilst we're talking about big social media companies and big tech firms, very recently, a couple of days ago, TikTok were fined almost 2 million by a not even a data regulator, by Ofcom, who have you heard of Ofcom, Teresa? I realise you're over the pond. Okay.
Ofcom and Ofgem, yes, I know. Ofcom is the regulators of broadcast and media. Yes.
So Ofcom fined TikTok almost £2 million for data related breaches. Basically, they asked TikTok to provide lawfully, they requested TikTok to provide information about the extent to which their platform is safe for minors. And TikTok didn't respond to this statutory request robustly. Ofcom investigated, find a whole pile of inadequacies around the way they collect the data that Ofcom were requesting, and recently fined TikTok, I think it was £1.82 million. It would be pounds because Ofcom's in the UK. What that tells me, and the only reason why I mentioned it is because we're talking about Instagram and LinkedIn, and TikTok, I think, is sort of up there.
Facebook is another one that's always getting fined. Facebook had a lawsuit, and that one came from the US.
So the thing with, exactly. But the thing that interested me with the TikTok fine is that that's a big fine from a non-data protection regulator with regards to data related issues. They basically said, if you read the commentary around this, the fine that was issued, they basically said, you know, TikTok is a massive firm, very well resourced and very well rehearsed in, you know, data related legislation. Our request of TikTok for this data it's a statutory request, it's a lawful request, it's a reasonable request, which TikTok should have handled robustly. And actually, with TikTok's failings, it makes us, Ofcom, look bad because we're trying to demonstrate transparency to users of
The
TikTok
public, yes.
and parents who have got kids that are using TikTok. We're trying to do our job lawfully to demonstrate transparency, and you've hinted that. So we're going to go in bold with a fine. And I think that sends out a really strong message to anyone out there around the importance of data accuracy.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that this fine, quite a big fine, came from a non-data protection regulator. That I think that's, speaks volumes.
Do you think the big data protection regulators are also doing those sorts of checks frequently enough, or are there not enough of them doing it? I mean, do you think there is some kind of shortcomings or shortfall in that respect?
Yeah. So, God, wow, that's a really interesting question, Saladina.
I know you have to obviously also be mindful about.
Yeah, because there are around the world, there are lots of, and particularly in Europe, there are lots of data protection regulators or supervisory authorities is a technical term under the legislation. And they have different approaches, let's put it like that. They have different approaches. And ours here in the UK is quite heavily criticised. The ICO, the Information Commissioner's Office, they're quite heavily criticised for not having enough teeth, or not using enough teeth, and particularly with regards to the public sector. I lose track of time. It might have been a year or 2 years ago. The ICO boldly came out and said, for public sector breaches, I mean, Teresa, you mentioned NHS, for public sector breaches, they're not going to fine, they're not going to issue fines. And that sends out a very interesting message and kind of just fuels the criticism against the ICO. Whereas when you look to other data protection regulators who are, they're not as well resourced as the ICO, they're much more aggressive, and they're not shy to enforce and issue fines and things like that. So I would say that I think all regulators could go further. Some are more active than others. The Irish Data Protection Commission, they're fantastic, I believe. I think they are very, I think they're reasonably proactive.
But Ireland is where all the major tech companies are in. So that's where you find Google. That's where you find, they're becoming the next Silicon Valley. So that's where you find all the major big companies, Amazon, all of the companies are there.
Exactly. So there is an expectation, or it is understandable, that the Irish DPC, the Irish Data Protection Commission, is reasonably proactive for those reasons, Teresa. And again, I do hear the criticism from some privacy professionals saying that the Irish DPC could go further. But when you compare the Irish DPC to other regulators, they're actually okay. But just to put this into context, the last time I checked, the ICO, certainly when you compare the ICO with other data protection regulators across Europe, the ICO is has the most resources, and yet
is it government? Is it a government entity? Is it government funded?
That's a really good question. So so I think things are changing because they need to be independent. I think there's a view that certainly under the previous administration, there's a view that the government would like to change reporting lines to if you like, reduce that level of independence and autonomy. But no, they are independent at the moment. They make their own decisions and rules. And as I say, this decision around not fining public sector organisations because they're cash strapped or whatever the reason was, that would have come from the ICO rather than any civil service department, so to speak.
Yeah. Do you think? Well, obviously, there's a clear kind of struggle with larger companies or the sort of regulation of data protection? Because I feel like there's this almost like three kind of areas when it comes to data protection. There's the the big company sort of expectation, or their obligation to protect data and privacy, etc. Then you've got the regulators who are there to regulate and hold these companies accountable for all that data. And then there's shortcomings there, and obviously within the companies themselves having to protect the data, there's shortcomings there. So do you feel that there is a bit of onus or responsibility of the individual as the consumer to start caring more about their own data, their own privacy? And do you think, as it stands right now, people, individuals, consumers, us, we don't care enough about our data and our own privacy, and we just leave it in the hands, or yes, I'm going to just consent, and oh, what's the matter if they know my name and my address and my number, and oh, so what if I put my card details in? And do you think people put too much trust in giving out their data? There should be a bit more responsibility on us and our own regulation of our own privacy and data. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I definitely agree. I think there are two things going on here. I think generationally, I mean, I have a young son, I have a young teenage son, and I know he's much more open about the personal data that he shares online than I would ever be, even when I was his age. And also, yes, I do think that things like GDPR and emerging global data protection legislation has raised awareness in individuals' consumers' minds, and we are much more, so therefore we have much more understanding around privacy and our rights, and we can be a bit more challenging as well and hold companies to account. So, the simple things we can do, going back to website privacy notices, is challenge those companies that don't have website privacy notices, or challenge those companies who have opaque website privacy notices. As individuals, we can do that. And as you say, that kind of complements the roles of data protection regulators.
Recently, speaking of, that's so funny because I did an update with my iPhone recently. And every time I had a conversation about a topic, it popped up on my Instagram, an ad or something popped up on my Instagram or popped up on the news. Every topic. I was in work having a conversation about trains that go through the mountains, and you can see is the 360 panoramic. How you say panoramic type of train? Anyway, so and all of a sudden it popped up on my Instagram, and I said, oh. And then I had another conversation, and I told my work colleague, I said, Big Brother is listening. I said, what is this stuff popping up on my? Every time I have a conversation, it pops up. And then my work colleague said, you need to go into settings. I said, but I've always denied that. So what changed now? And then I thought, I just did an update.
Yes.
I just did an update because this wasn't going on before. And then she said, yes, you have to decline. And I was like, why did they change my settings?
When they update, so when any phone updates, whether it's iOS, so whether it's iPhone, whether it's Android, anytime there's an update, one, you should read the updates and what they're going to update. And normally when they update, they also update the settings automatically. And a lot of phones, especially now, they have listening settings. So if it's an Android, you have a Google listening setting. So that's for, the Google Speak, which is basically Siri. And you have the same for iOS, for Apple, you would have, a listening device option, which is mainly for they can pick up your voice, because when you first get your phone, obviously you do the voice recognition, so that it can pick up your voice tone, so that when you send commands to your phone, it picks things up. So when you have the listening setting on, it picks those things up, and it thinks the idea is trying to help you, show you advertisements that link to things that you're interested in. It's the way it's obviously prefaced is, you know.
But this was an advertising setting. And when she showed me, she Googled it and she showed me, and then I went and switched off, and it says advertising, turn advertising off or something like that. I said, what is
Yeah,
this?
because they think, because the preference they have is, they want to try and make things easier for you to consume. The idea is that it's an easier route for you to be able to go and buy. If you've just been talking about it, then an ad's going to come up and you were just talking about it, and then you're already thinking about it, so you're going to probably consume and buy because you've already got the preference of wanting to to buy this thing. So I think the whole idea is that chain of events. But I think what people kind of don't appreciate is that, especially when you do updates, it resets a lot of settings and it also adds additional settings. So I would always say, check and I used to work for phone companies and very interested in like phone tech and phone technology and stuff like that. So, and operating systems and whatnot. So I kind of really love this dynamic. And I've always told my family, like, make sure you read the stuff, make sure you update. When you do updates, read the updates. If you do an update, make sure you go to your settings and recheck all of the settings are exactly how you want them to be, because they will go in and change things. I mean, when it was obviously during lockdown, they obviously put a new setup on most or all smartphones, all the latest smartphones, the emergency setting. So, if something happens, it will automatically go to a emergency service and it will automatically send your data. And all the phones had this update go on, and it wasn't a function that was actually available on the phone until this update came. So, they could put new functions on the phone, even though you've got the same device that you bought maybe 2 or 3 years ago, just by through a new operating system update. And every time you press consent, I have something that's coming up on my phone all the time now, asking me to give them consent for my location. So I say no and I exit, and it keeps coming up, and then it's gone away for a while, and I've noticed it coming back again. And so even when you try to deny sharing your information, it will keep trying to access or ask for your consent for access to your privacy and your data. And it's hoping it can break you down and eventually, I don't want this thing to keep popping up. But I think that is the challenge as well. We are being bombarded with this request for our information. And like you said, like your son, there's a different generation of people who don't understand the importance of having to save your data, because some of us who are kind of a different generation, we always knew it was about keeping your own privacy. We never had so many instances where we had to share our information. If someone said, "Oh, can I have your address?" we'd instantly say, "No, of course you can't have my address." But now a website in between you and buying these new shoes or this new dress or this new outfit or buying tickets, you're going to be like, yeah, I'm going to give you all the information I want, you're asking me for, because I want to this is the means to an end to get to what I want. So I think that the change of culture that we're having, because this data is in between what people want and what people, what people
And
have.
then they selling it to third parties, and the selling of data. It's one thing to share data for marketing purposes, business purposes, analytics, but then the sharing of data to sell your information off to someone else, and then that person sell your information off to someone else.
And then sometimes I get, you've been part of a security breach type messages or here and there. But I never gave my data to ancestry.com or who else, find my livingpersons.com or whoever. I never gave my information to them. So where are they getting this information?
Yeah, it's really naughty, and I find it really frustrating. My experience of this sort of thing, I mean, I don't have face recognition or voice recognition on my phone. Sorry, haven't enabled it. So that might explain why I've not experienced some of the difficulties that you've mentioned, Teresa. But my frustration with the whole kind of what I call aggressive marketing thing is where I go into a shop and they'll ask if I want a digital receipt. Invariably, I will ask them, I'm happy to have a digital receipt, but just I'm giving you my email address just for that. I don't want marketing.
Yeah.
but very often I get the marketing as well. That's I
Yeah.
find that, because that is technically unlawful,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
that, I find that intensely frustrating.
Yeah.
Everybody who emailed me, and if you email me and I did not consent, you go into spam and I'm reporting you to Microsoft. Everybody, and I happily do it every single day. If I did not share my information with you, you get reported to Microsoft as spam and you get blocked. And I do it every single day. I do the same for LinkedIn.
Yeah.
And that's great, because that goes back to the consumer accountability that Sahiludeen mentioned. I think that's fantastic, Teresa. More of us need to do that.
Yeah. We have to see the importance of it. Like we said, the importance of your data. It's yours. It's you. It's who you are. It's your digital footprint. You know, it's your digital identity, isn't it? And we should definitely, more of us as consumers, be more protective of our digital identity as we would do our physical identity. You know, we wouldn't give out our address. We wouldn't write our address on a piece of paper and put it out on a lamppost for everybody to see. We wouldn't leave our door open unlocked. We wouldn't, you know, do all these things from a physical protection, privacy perspective. So I think now that, you know, data and information, it's because it's not tangible and it's not, we can't see it. So it's almost like we don't kind of see the importance of it. But I think there needs to be a framing of the importance of our personal information and how very dangerous and detrimental it can be. You know, we're setting ourselves up for, you know, a really, you know, bad position. And that's why, you know, people get targeted for different, you know, fraud things. And they then have to be aware of, okay, there might be an instance where I clicked yes, or I didn't see the tick box was already ticked when I went next to submit. And you may have been, you know, exposed to a situation where you're going to be spammed or you're going to have some fraud. I think then there's going to be a level of awareness that you have to have when you get certain text messages or you get certain calls, and you have to then screen, you know, from that. I think we all have to kind of, we've breached ourselves at some point or another. I think there's so much going on that it's almost inevitable that we've all been part of a breach of some kind, and we're going to get email.
And then you look at different countries, that their laws are different. So when you're dealing with kind of companies that's in China or whatnot, then it's the WhatsApp. They starting with the WhatsApp now, you know, and the spamming of the WhatsApp, which is, and guess what I do? I put them in archive or block them, or and I don't care if you were shopping, if I shop with you, because I don't like Shein or those places. People say Shein or whoever, I don't care, but those places, they're based in China, which is fine, and I just decided to shop. But that doesn't mean you send me 20 million texts on WhatsApp.
You just have to be
and I might have clicked it, but I know how to block.
You have to be diligent. I got a text message just a week ago from an unknown number, and the text message said, I got a missed call from this number. Please, can you tell me like who this is? Kiss. And I was like, I haven't called anybody lately. And I thought, let me just check the number. I checked the number. I haven't made any calls to this number. So then to me, it's like, this is a spam, you know, as soon as you respond, it's going to trigger something, you know, so you have to be diligent. You have to do your investigations. You have to be like, you have to scrutinize. And just as you said, Christina, the something as simple as these shops saying, oh, can I get your email for the email receipt? I literally had it yesterday, and I know what they're asking for. They're asking me for my data to market to me. So I just say, I don't have a physical receipt. I prefer physical anyway. But, you know, as you said, you have to be aware that these people are just trying to get your data. They're not trying to make it easy for you to not carry paper or save the planet. They're just trying to get your information so they can sell you more. So
and data is currency, as you say. It's as valuable as that. It's as valuable as
we live
the
in
money
a marketing
it's
a
as
marketing
valuable
world.
as data's as valuable as the money that we keep in our wallets or in our purses. And there was just a point that you touched on, Sahiludeen, around the data being our data, because of course it is. But going back to Teresa's earlier point around the lack of awareness, some companies don't realize that. I remember last year, lose track of time, last year or the year before, I worked with a client who onboarded me because they shared an ex-employee's data with the new employer of the ex-employee, and that ex-employee left my client's company under bad terms. And basically what my client did was they wrote a reference, amongst other things, wrote a reference for this ex-employee that wasn't brilliant. So and then this ex-employee heard about it. So my client onboarded me to help them get out of this mess. One of the first things my client said to me was, but surely it's okay for us to share this data with the new employer. It's our data, isn't it?
I had something happen that to me similar, and the sad part about it, it was an NHS company, and the lady just had an infamy. She had an infamy, even though I left on good terms, I was laid off. She told them that I was difficult to work with, and I've never been difficult to work with. And where do you draw the line between personal vendetta and personal? So I did the GDPR. I requested that all of my employers, because they wouldn't tell me which employer said it, but I knew who it was. All my employers gave me the data. Almost all of them gave me the data besides the one that I thought. Now, I wanted to fight it. I did. I said I would take them to court, but then I said, you know what? My energy belongs elsewhere. And it's not meant for me to be in that place. It wasn't meant for me, because if you turn around, and I provided references, if you turn around and go search and come back and you believe that, then that's up to you, you know? But where do you draw the line between, people don't realize, negative, when you do a reference, it can only be factual. It should only be factual, because it's when they told me, I said, but that's their personal opinion. Difficult to work with is that person, and I've never had that. I had references put in letters, and I've always had good references. But that particular one, that same person used to go around saying racist stuff and that person worked in HR. It was an HR director.
Okay.
And she would say prejudice stuff, like that's the one that told the lady, can I call you something else? Because I don't want to feel like I'm praying to someone's God, because her name sounded like Allah.
Okay.
So here it is. You got someone who's prejudiced that give out a bad reference. Companies, no, you can't do that. You can't, because it's subjective. It's subjective. It's personal. And then you just made the person lose, a contract or whatnot. But there's some, my thing is, there's some not nice people in this world. And I had left that company 3 years. 3 years later, and you still had it in it. Yet when she told me that she laid me off and I was made redundant, I had a smile on my face. I said, no problem, And she said, I'm not worried about you. I'm worried about the other person, because you'll be all right. And I left it like that. No bad feelings or whatever. How do you come back 3 years later and give and say that, when I've had no write-ups, no nothing? So I just find, this, even with the reference part, I think NHS needs to, because NHS, they require references. If you ever work with the NHS, they require it. And they want to know, there's a rating system and everything, how the person works, how does it. Yeah. So when you work, I think that needs to be looked at as well, because there's a lot of racism also within the NHS and NHS networks that I've found over the years. And it's just not me. It's the nurses have said the same thing, complained about the same thing. Where do you draw the line as far as, giving out personal personal subjective references, and then non-subjective? I think the laws also need to get strict on that. And when I did challenge the company that withdrew the contract, they said that
their terms under their what's the name. I said, but it says it doesn't say this. So I challenged them on their own wording as well, because their wording, and I said the law doesn't say that. The law says, and I also included ACUS, which is not really law, but it's just a guideline. Into it anyway, but yeah, that's something that companies need to realize, that you can't give out subjective references. It's just
Yes, and employee data is employee data. The company may have it, and
yeah,
they're entitled to use it within reason, but fundamentally it belongs to the individual. And some organizations just don't get that, which is
yeah,
bad. They seem to think because it's within their gift, because the employee data is within their gift, they can use it, they own it, they are the legal owner of that data, and they can use it how they like, which is certainly in the
yeah.
UK and Europe, that's really not the case.
Yeah. I just want to switch gears a little bit, because I know that there's so much that you've done, Christina. And one of the things that we went through when I was reading going through your bio, was that you have a networking group, or you have a networking organization. Obviously, you do a lot of coaching and mentorship anyway. And obviously, you've got a wealth of knowledge and experience and all of that. But tell us a little bit more about, before obviously we close up, and tell us a little bit more about your networking group, what inspired you to do that, and particularly within the arena of underrepresented groups, and also a little bit more about your consultancy and what you do and what your services are, what you offer, because I'm sure that a lot of people might not be aware, and they might have people who own small businesses or large businesses who are like, after hearing this conversation, feel, you know what, actually I need to get a bit more savvy with my data privacy. So tell us a little bit more about your networking organization and your consultancy, and yeah.
Amazing, thank you for the opportunity. So I'll start with the professional network, which is a massive passion of mine. It's called the UK Black Privacy Professionals Network. So it's for, as the name says on the tin, I guess, it's for Black privacy professionals who are based in the UK. So anyone that works in the privacy space, data protection, cyber and AI governance, anyone is welcome to join our professional network. I set it up last summer, so we've been running for a year. We've got about 150 members, from early careers through to very senior lawyers and beyond, very senior directors and law firm partners. And we are focused on upskilling. So we've got a number, we've arranged over the past year, we've arranged a number of events that facilitate upskilling, knowledge sharing, coaching, mentorship, and so on. We've got some strategic partners. Shhh is one of our strategic partners, a top tier law firm here in the UK. We've got the UK Black Business Show as well, one of our strategic partners, and we're doing great work together with both of those strategic partners. We're always looking for more members. We're always looking for more partners. So my reasons for setting it up, as I say, I've been a Black privacy professional for many, many years, more than 15 years now. And the privacy community has changed, evolved, and continues to grow. And I've seen that certainly for early careers Black privacy professionals, there are struggles, either struggling to get into the privacy profession or they're struggling to progress. And I just felt that they needed support, they needed leadership, they needed mentorship, they needed upskilling, they needed confidence boosting, they needed empowerment. So that's the reason, that's the main reason why I set up the professional network, because I believed and still believe that need is there for us as Black privacy professionals, that need for confidence boosting and empowerment, that need is there, and it just wasn't being met. And in terms of my business, as you say, it's GRC information management. I do increasingly AI governance, so AI risk assessments, data protection and cybersecurity compliance. And typically I will help organizations ensure that they've got the right data protection policies in place, make sure they've got the right training in place, and do the AI risk assessments on the AI tools that they want to use, adopt and implement, and make sure that everything that they do in the data protection, cybersecurity, in AI space is compliant, safe, and ethical.
Amazing. Well, congratulations, one, on setting up your organization, and you know, in such a short space of time, what you've been able to achieve so far. And it's obviously a testament to the need and real requirement for what it is that you're providing, and to have, you know, the partnerships that you do. So no, and I know firsthand what it's like to set up an organization like that. So so well done to you doing that as well, you know, in conjunction with your own business. And it, you know, it's great in the field that you're in, and you're able to, you know, share knowledge and really help, you know, other businesses with, you know, being compliant and being ethical, and, you know, supporting them in making a more secure future, you know,
Yeah.
It's something that she said that I also find, and I put a post similar, that, you know, certain some of us in certain spaces, we're failing to have the right leadership and mentorship, you know, to move in the direction we have and have that support. And it's just wonderful that you're able to give that to your you know, industry and people in that, you know, that want to advance and want to go other places. Do you think, are your members, are they worldwide, or are they UK based? And you know, do you think it's something in the UK, or do you think that it's just the overall industry in itself?
That's a really good question. So at the moment, we're UK based.
Yeah.
We do want to go global, but there are some key things that we want to do and get right before we go global. We would like more members, so we just want to mature a little bit. We want to launch our website, which is fairly soon, and we want to formally launch our mentorship program. They're the three key things that we do want to get right before we go global. And there was something else that you asked me. Yes, that's right. Whether the issues that I found are within the UK or global. Yeah, that's a really good question. You see, the reason why I'm struggling to answer the question is because what I'm going to say now kind of goes to show how relatively new the privacy industry is. There's limited stats on diversity and inclusion within privacy, within the UK and globally. But what I have seen, just to help me demonstrate the need for my professional network, for our professional network, I should say, what I have seen is when I look at the membership of UK and global privacy organizations and networks, and when I look at the membership base in terms of who the members are and their job titles, it's quite clear that the senior roles are going to white men.
Yes.
And it's quite clear that Black women in particular are struggling to progress. So that's what I've seen. And that's what I've seen certainly within the UK.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things in terms of pipeline work for us within the professional network, one of the things for us is to do research so that we have concrete and reliable data around the diversity and inclusion issues, because I feel a lot of what I'm saying or feeling and seeing is anecdotal. And I would like hard evidence to kind of further corroborate the need for the professional network.
Yeah, really interesting. I'll be definitely staying close and keeping an eye out, you know, because I you know, it's interesting, and it's always nice to see and look into other people's industries and see what's going on. And you know, there is a general theme, you know, that there is a lot of underrepresentation of certain groups in many sectors, particularly the UK, but also globally. So it's really interesting to see different groups and organizations coming up to help support underrepresented people and bring a bit more equity and equality within their sectors. So yeah, it's you know, I'm sure it will be a interesting journey, but I hope, you know, I'm sure it will improve for sure. You know, it's good to get people together and have a collective goal and just highlight that. And I think you've done that very well. I think you've, you know, you very much highlighted that that awareness that there are a group of people who, you know, are underrepresented within this industry, and this might be very people to experience. So I'm just very grateful and glad that you were able to come on our podcast today and share the story with us, and also highlight that.
And it shows through the numbers of people who have joined, or you know, in such a small time as well, that there is a need for what you're doing. So I'm so proud of you, Christina.
Well, thank you. That's really kind. And in terms of member testimonials, it's heartwarming to read them, because they are confirming what we are seeing and feeling, in that a year of membership for them has meant progression, new job, enhanced confidence, whether that's confidence in their role, confidence when they're performing at interviews. This is the feedback that we're getting. So it's heartwarming to hear that we're meeting a need, people value and appreciate what we're doing, and people are genuinely benefiting from it. We're having an impact within just a year. So that is really heartwarming to hear.
Fantastic.
But thank you for the opportunity to join you. Thank you for listening to my story. I've enjoyed the questions, the wonderful and insightful questions. Thank you very much for all of that.
No problem.
So we always ask our guests 2 questions, and they're a bit more relaxed, but it's also still very informative. So the 2 questions that we ask us is, what's one of the things, or one of the kind of things that you've learned now that you kind of wish you knew before, or you know, would tell your younger self, maybe starting out? So that's the first question. And then the other thing would be, what would be a book that you would recommend people should read, that you enjoy or find really insightful?
Okay. So for the first question, I would say to my younger self, maybe start your career with an open mind and a goal to pursue a portfolio career. And do you know what I mean? Yeah, multiple income streams. I do wish I had that advice way back then. I mean, that's where I am now, but I just wish I had that advice way back then. In terms of books, so I rarely read. I read a lot of cases and articles and case studies as well. But I'm really into empathetic leadership, caring leadership at the moment. So I would encourage anyone, you know, whether you are a leader or an aspiring leader, read up on any leadership book or books that come your way that help you nurture and cultivate your leadership style. That would be my general advice.
Fantastic. No,
that's great advice.
Thank you. Well, you know, Christina, it's been an absolute pleasure. It's been very insightful. You know, I've learned some new things. Yeah. I'm sure there's things that you've also learned, and we've all reinforced things that we already know. So it's really nice to, you know, just have such a great conversation about data and privacy. I mean, who knew? It would be so interesting. We're talking for so long. You know, people might not anticipate that. You know, we could continue probably talking, but you know, it's been a really great conversation, and hopefully we can get you back on some point in the future as well, and see how things have developed, especially in the field of AI, and as that's starting to develop as well. But yeah, but thank you again. So we will just do it. So thank you everybody for joining, listening, and watching us on Shh, Don't Speak on It podcast, the podcast that makes you feel energized, informed, and empowered. Again, I'm Saheladine.
And I'm Teresa, and remember to always speak on it.
And I'm Christina. Remember, always speak on it.
Shh, don't speak on it. Thank you.
Yeah.